Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Monday Night Must See TV with the Hudson Valley Squares. We've got in the house tonight. We got the king himself, Chris Allo,
Woohoo!
Bryce from Bryce Talks Metal,
What's
and
up?
the cans, Chris Canzaneri. What's up, gentlemen?
What's going on, everybody?
What's up, man?
You guys ready to talk about some replacement band members who, on paper, sounded like a weird fit, but yet when they actually got together to make some music, the album or albums that came after the union worked pretty well, I guess, right? So, we're mainly talking about hard rock and metal stuff here, but we may fall into other genres. But I've asked the guys to each pick out a few instances where they thought that the kind of combination, as weird as it might have seemed, actually worked pretty well. So we'll start off with Mr. Canzaneri. We'll go Cans, Bryce, Chris, and myself. Well, we'll go around. Since there's only four of us, we could probably do a couple trips around if we need to. So, Chris, why don't you kick us off?
All right. I'm going to start by breaking out of those rules a little bit. This
Nice.
guy, yeah, this
Right
guy
off
did
the bat. Right off the bat.
an
Bill
album.
Nicotino right away.
Whatever. I think I'm pretty close to what you want here, though. This guy didn't actually make an album with the band, but he toured with them. And I'm talking about the Black Sabbath Born Again tour, and I'm talking about Bev Bevan on drums.
Ooh, yeah.
Who, was a guy from ELO. He wasn't known for playing heavy music, and he joined Black Sabbath for this tour. And I've watched a lot of it. I wasn't old enough to go. Well, I probably was, but I didn't see them then. And, I really dislike Ian Gillan as a member of Black Sabbath, at least live.
Interesting.
Him scatting on Supernaut, I just can't stand it. I mean, I've watched probably 5 videos today, and he's all like, well, just give it in. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Just let him play. I mean, I love Ian Gillan, I love Deep Purple, and I love Black Sabbath, but I think the guy that kicked that band in the ass for that, few months was Bev Bevan. I think the guy played drums pretty damn well, spiced things up, and I think that was a pretty good fit, and it didn't work out. I mean, the whole band pretty much blew up for like a year after that. I think Gillan hated being in the band, and
No, he loved it.
oh, well, wasn't the tour so fucked up that they like inspired freaking This Is Spinal Tap or something? I read something.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he went back to Deep Purple.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But Ian Gillan told me that was the greatest year of my life.
Wow, no kidding.
He's like, it was a nonstop party with Tony and Geezer, and he loved it.
Wow. I read a whole bunch of shit today, and it was like he was sick of it, and he was done, and he took off and went back to Deep Purple. Either way.
This is Ian Gillan we're talking about. He probably different all the
I
time.
think Bev did a good job. I mean, Ian Gillan, obviously, everybody knew he'd be fucking good, but I thought Bev Bevan wasn't really a heavy metal guy, and he jumped in there and did pretty well.
I tell you, as someone who did see that tour, I thought Bev fit in very, very well because he never played heavy rock before, but if you listen to a lot of those old ELO albums, he had some heavy drumming on some of that stuff, so it really worked pretty well, I thought. And it's a shame that they didn't do any records with him, but him and Tony are like best friends. And
yeah, I just saw a picture today on Facebook that Bev Bevan got married over the weekend, and Tony Iommi was his best man.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, not surprising.
Cool.
So that's a good choice.
Yeah.
Bryce, what do you got?
Nice. All right. So for my first one, I'm going to go with Brad Gillis joining Ozzy's solo band. Just basically, if you're looking at it from like that time period, Brad was a guy who was in a band called Rubicon in the 70s, which is like funk pop music. So nobody really knew that he could shred like that. I mean, some did, but like in the mainstream, I don't think too many people knew. So after Randy Rhoads passed away, they got Bernie Torme, who didn't really end up being a good fit, and then they got Brad to finish out that tour. They did Speak of the Devil, and that's a great album, doing all the classic Black Sabbath stuff. Freaking Brad kills it on that album. I think he's amazing. Just I don't think people really knew how good he was until that came out, for the most part, I'd say. I don't know if y'all knew of him before that. Yeah. I mean, just I don't think, to me, like being in Rubicon, just it didn't really seem like too much of a metal guy that would be a great fit. But
Yeah.
Yeah, he got in there and did great, I think, and he didn't last too long. And the first Night Ranger album wasn't even out yet, so nobody really knew him from that. And yeah, so that is my first choice, Brad Gillis with Ozzy.
Cool. Chris.
All right, my pick, definitely not Pete's favorite band, and certainly not my favorite band, but a band I did like in the early 80s. But then I kept buying their records and I kept seeing their shows, even though they were never really that good. Motley Crue. And I remember, Motley Crue had such an amazing run with Dr. Feelgood, even though I thought that record sucked. And, then they got some huge advance from Elektra. Then they parted ways with Vince. Either he quit or got fired, depending on whether you want to believe Ozzy's story or Tony Iommi's story, because it's the same fucking thing. But anyway, they bring in John Corabi, and I was like, yeah, the dude from the Scream? I don't know how that's going to fucking sound. And man, I absolutely love the 1994 Motley Crue record. It's the only Motley Crue record that I still listen to. It's the only Motley Crue record I give a shit about. And I know Motley Crue are playing stadiums right now. I would pay huge money just to see Motley Crue with John Corabi play the Chance or wherever the fuck, because I love that record. And it's so heavy. It's the heaviest thing they ever did. But it's still kind of grounded in reality. It's, Shout Out the Devil was heavy, but that was Nikki Sixx just writing whatever the fuck. But yeah, so that's my pick. The 1994 Motley Crue record with John Corabi.
One and done. That's
yeah.
Right. Speaking of one and done, on paper, this seemed like a weird fit. And I remember when this album first came out, I was like, first time I heard it, I was kind of like, yeah, this is really different. But the more I listened to it, the more I really liked it. And then I was kind of sad when it didn't work out. Brian Robertson joins Motorhead for Another Perfect Day. He, at the time, when he joined the band, he didn't really look the part but when he was in Thin Lizzy, of course, Brian Robertson had the long hair and he just looked like a hard rocker and whatever. And then he joins Motorhead. He cut his hair short. He was wearing the stupid bandana or hairband, whatever, and wore shorts on stage. And meanwhile, he just did not look like he fit with Lemmy or Filthy. But the album itself is great. His guitar playing is great on there. This is a heavy album. Some people at the time, Motorhead diehard fans, were kind of like, it's not heavy enough. It's not grimy enough. Robertson ruined it. He needs to leave the band. And he only lasted for the tour, and that was it. But I think all these years later, we look back on this album as a kind of a really cool gem in the catalog. And he fit right in. And it's a shame he didn't last any longer than he did. And sadly enough, Brian Robertson's career kind of like went really nowhere after this. He little stops and starts here and there. But yeah. Brian Robertson and Motorhead, Another Perfect Day. Weird fit, but it works. Really good album. Back to Chris.
All right. This one, kind of going back again. I don't really remember this happening. I wasn't old enough and I hadn't even heard of any of these guys at this time. But looking back, this seemed like it might have been taken as being kind of weird. I'm talking about when John Wetton joined Uriah Heep for 2 albums. The first one being Return to Fantasy, which is a kick-ass album. It's not the best Uriah Heep album by any means, but it's a pretty damn good album. And I'm not sure John Wetton was known for playing heavy music back then.
No.
And it was like, okay, the guy from Asia, the singer, this guy was in Uriah Heep, fucking cool. I'll check it out. And there's some pretty good songs on there. The title track's freaking great. Devil's Daughter is a great song. Beautiful Dreams, another great one. I think the first side of this album is much better than the second side. There's some, I think this song's called Prima Donna or something on the second side with horns and whatever. I'm like, this shouldn't be here. But that album was pretty good. The second one he did with him I didn't like as much, but I thought that was kind of a weird fit, and it definitely worked for at least one album. And then he moved on to other things, and Uriah Heep did too. But I think it worked.
Yeah, I would agree there. So he was mostly known as a prog guy before then, because he worked Family and Mogul Thrash, and of course King Crimson, and then he's in Uriah Heep, and then he joined Wishbone Ash for an album, and then of course we had UK and Asia and all that other stuff. But yeah, kind of a weird fit on paper because he also is more of a singer, right? So but he's dancing a little bit in Uriah Heep, but mostly he was just brought in as a bass player. So I guess it was just a paycheck for him. But yeah, I like those albums. I think they're good. High and Mighty's got some good songs. It's not the best of the two of them, but yeah. Bryce.
All right. So my next choice, I'm going to go with Meatloaf joining Ted Nugent for Free For All in 1976. So Derek St. Holmes quit the band briefly there when they were recording it, and the producer Tom Werman brought in Meatloaf for $1,000. I was reading about it. It said that they sent him the lyrics with like no arrangements or anything, so he had to like do all that himself, and he does really well on this. And the stuff that he was doing before, I don't know a ton about Meatloaf. I don't really like much of his solo material. I looked up some of this other stuff he did before that, Stoney and Meatloaf, an album from the early 70s, which is this weird like gospel R&B, and it sounds like it would not be a good fit with Ted Nugent at all. But he kills it on here. I think Writing on the Wall is one of the best Ted Nugent songs, and Meatloaf is amazing on that one. He sings it, and St. Holmes did do 2 of the tracks on here, and Ted sang the title track, and then Meatloaf sang the other 5. So Meatloaf sang the majority, and it's a great album. He sounds awesome on it, and yeah, that's my second choice there, Meatloaf with Ted Nugent.
Great choice. Yeah, he kills it on that album.
Yeah, he is really good on it.
Yeah, that's a great choice. I didn't even think of that one. Chris.
All right, mine is from the late 80s. One of my favorite bands split up, but it's got to be one of the most amicable splits, I think, in the history of metal, when Accept parted ways with Udo, but they were like, okay, we're going to help you do a solo record, and you can contribute some stuff to our new record with our new singer. And I was like, this is really weird, but okay. And I figured I was going to hate the Accept record with the new singer, but I liked it. And I just listened to it the other day, 1989's Eat the Heat record, which featured David Reece. And I still really like it. Some of the, it's a little different. It's, old school Accept trying to update their sound. Obviously the vocals are different, but some of the songs are really good. And, I guess the proof is in the fact that Udo Dirkschneider doesn't sing on that record, but yet he's covered a couple of the songs on, with his solo stuff, doing songs from this Accept record that he's not on, which is mind-blowing. Yeah, really. And I remember seeing Accept in 1989 with David Reece. It was Metal Church, Accept, and Wasp, and that was a fun show. And I thought David Reece did a decent job of fronting Accept at the time. But yeah, that was a one and done. But I thought it was pretty good, and I think it's still a pretty good record.
Cool. Yeah, he's a pretty good singer, actually, David.
Yeah, he's not bad.
Whether you think he's good in Accept or not is another thing.
And the funny thing is, he recently talked with Udo. They were going to try and do, of course, in Europe, they were going to try and do a tour together where David Reece was going to open and do, stuff from Eat the Heat, and then Udo would come out and do the, and I'm sure they would probably would have done Generation Clash or something together. But I don't know if it ever panned out, but it was kind of a cool idea.
All right. I still think this pairing is really weird today, but the first album they did together, they did 2 albums together. Actually, the first one's pretty damn good. So it's interesting how Chris brought up Uriah Heep before. How about Ken Hensley joining Blackfoot for the Siago album? Again, Ken Hensley in a Southern rock band. What? Like, where did this, like, I'd love to know how this came to be. But the album is not that bad. It's pretty good, actually. It's kind of a little bit more commercial than some of the Blackfoot albums that came before, but it still kicks ass pretty much. It's got Send Me an Angel on here, Teenage Idol, Run for Cover. It's pretty good. But I just never thought I would ever want to hear this kick-ass Southern rock band with like Hammond organ and other keyboards, and it's just kind of strange. But it seemed to work for a couple of years. Of course, the album that came after this was pretty terrible. So the good stuff didn't last too long. And then inexplicably, he goes and joins Wasp a couple of years later. And that's just as weird. So yeah, Ken Hensley moving on from Uriah Heep, going to Blackfoot, going to Wasp. But a couple good albums there anyway. So back to Chris.
All right, this one. This one, I don't think this guy, if people knew who he was, they would have thought he would have been a bad fit for the band. People who knew who he was knew this guy was a kick-ass singer. It's Johnny Edwards. He was in King Cobra for one album. He did Montrose's last album.
Yep.
Killer singer. But when Lou Gramm quit Foreigner, they hired him for one album.
Yep. And
nobody knew who the fuck he was. And Foreigner was, pretty much fading out by then. But they got together for this one album, Unusual Heat, which is a pretty good album. I mean, it's from 1991, and it sounds every freaking minute you're listening to it like it's from 1991. And it's good, though. I mean, it's Johnny Edwards, man. This guy kind of sounds a little like Dave Coverdale, and he's got that big, thick, soaring voice to do the Lou Gramm type shit that Foreigner was doing before. So I thought it was a pretty decent album for what it is. It's kind of a last gasp for Foreigner, too. I don't think they did much after that until much more recently. And Johnny kind of disappeared. But these two came together, made one great album, or decent album, I guess. But Johnny Edwards, freaking killer singer that nobody knows about.
And he had been like toiling in obscurity for a while before they even found him. So it's interesting how they came together. And Foreigner kind of did it again, right? They hired Kelly Hansen from Hurricane many, many years later, which kind of seemed like a weird fit, but he's made a late career for himself in that band. So and they haven't turned back since. So cool. Bryce.
All right. So with my last pick here, I'm going to go with Rebel Meets Rebel, which was a post-Humanist released album that had Dimebag Darrell on it. Basically, it was Pantera with David Allen Coe as the singer. So it's not quite, it's basically what we're looking for here, but so it's country with the vocals mixed with Pantera style heavy metal. It's really heavy with those weird country vocals, which, it's kind of a weird pairing, but I think it works out pretty well. There's a cool music video for the song Nothing to Lose, which is probably the best song on it. But pretty cool album that I'd recommend for anybody to check out if you like Pantera.
Cool. Yeah, that is kind of a strange.
Yeah, that is a weird one. It's a good one though. It's a good pick.
Yeah. I remember totally thinking, "Oh, this is going to be bizarre. I'm not going to like this at all." And I was like, "That's all right."
Yeah, it's pretty good.
The vocals are take a little getting used to, but musically, it's pretty good. So, all right, Chris.
This lineup lasted more than one record, but that's pretty much all they did was a couple records. I remember thinking I'm going to hate this album, but to my surprise, in 1989, I liked it, and I just rebought it for like a second or third time or fourth time. I don't know. Venom's 1989 Prime Evil album. Venom had parted ways with Kronos. I was a huge Venom fan at the time. Still am. Spoiler alert. And they did this record called Prime Evil with this guy, Tony Dolan, the Demolition Man, who was in this thrash band that I barely remember reading about once in the back of Kerrang called Atom Craft. It was like, wow, these guys were really not well known. But man, I think the Prime Evil record was great. I still think it's great. I just bought it again recently with, tracks like the title track, Parasite, Blackened Are the Priests, and of course, years later, Tony Dolan would get together with Mantis and Abaddon and form the Venom side project, Venom Inc., which is still going to this day. But yeah, I was shocked when I actually did really like the Prime Evil record, which I think is still the best thing that Tony's done with them. Although the new record, which actually I have next to me, what's it called? It's the only prop I got with me, Pete. There's Only Black. It's so black you can't even see it on the.
See it. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
good though.
But that's really good. It's probably the second best thing they've done.
Yeah, cool. All right, here's another one and done lineup. So in the early '90s, Chris Oliva passes away from Savatage, and they go out and replace him with Alex Skolnick from Testament. And I remember thinking that's a really weird fit. Alex Skolnick, right? Shredder from a kick-ass Bay Area thrash band, and Savatage not really a thrash band. And they put out this album called Handful of Rain. Not only that, but you also have Zach Stevens on vocals now. You've got no John Oliva on this album, so it's kind of like this brand new Savatage. But you know what? Pretty good album, and who would think, because this did not last long, this lineup, that many years later Alex Skolnick would join up with TSO, right, and become part of the Savatage family tree once again. But yeah, it's different. It's not quite what you remember from classic Savatage from all the 80s albums and even the early 90s albums, but it's pretty good. I thought it worked for the one album.
That's a good one. I know, Pete, we were sticking to albums, but I was gonna say if we were doing live, sticking with Savatage, I remember I saw Jeff Waters from Annihilator play guitar for Savatage at Whacken. I forget what year it was, but that was kind of an interesting thing and pretty unique at the time. That was 2000 something.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a couple of guys who have kind of come and gone in Savatage quickly over the years, like Al Pitrelli was in the band for a little bit, not too long. Jack Frost was in the band for a little bit.
That's right. Yep.
He was for a little short period of time. So yeah, they've had some guys kind of pop in and out of the band. So, Chris, you got any others?
Well, I think it would be a travesty not to mention Yes's Drama album with Trevor Horn from the Buggles. And I stayed off of that one. I figured Butch would, if he was here, would have picked that because you know how much he loves that album. But yeah, killer album, totally different for them. And I guess Trevor Horn couldn't sing the old songs without ripping his throat apart, so he quit the band right after that.
Yep.
Another one, not because of styles, but I think personalities. Chris Adler playing drums in Megadeth. I knew that would blow up, with Dave and him, but it was interesting while it lasted.
Yeah.
And I think even Robert Trujillo joined in Metallica, and they didn't do any albums that I ever fucking listened to. But, this guy was getting funkier and funkier as his career went on. And then, he took the money. So good for him. Not good for me.
And speaking of Yes, I had in my honorable mentions, I had Trevor Rabin in Yes as well, because I think that was.
I don't know why I said Trevor Horn. It's Trevor Rabin. Did Trevor Horn?
Trevor Horn as well. I mean, yeah. Well, Trevor Horn and
Rabin was more important to me.
Yeah. And I think well, because Trevor Horn, nobody really knew who he was, because I don't think the Buggles, other than that one song, they really weren't much of anybody. But like Trevor Rabin was a pretty respected musician, but again, really nobody. And to be replacing Steve Howe and Yes was kind of, and he just so different, but obviously 90125 was immense. So yeah, I guess that kind of worked. Chris, you got any others?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
The only other one I thought of, this lineup did last for 2 records in the 90s when Jerry Only and Doyle restarted the Misfits. They replaced Glenn Danzig with an unknown kid named Michael Graves, and they did 2 records, 1997's American Psycho and 1999's Famous Monsters. And I always talk about it with Steve, because Steve Keeler only likes those 2 Misfits records. He doesn't like any of the classic stuff. But yeah, that's a band that's sort of, it's kind of taboo to bring up Michael Graves because most Misfits fans hate those albums. And Michael Graves did some weird political shit, which I don't even remember, and I don't give a fuck. But those 2 records I think are pretty good. It's more metallic, but still, close enough to the Misfits style writing. And yeah, those 2 records I thought were pretty good.
Cool. Well, I got a bunch that I haven't mentioned yet, so maybe I'll run through them. Maybe that'll spark some other ones for you guys. But how about this one? Joe Lynn Turner joins Yngwie Malmsteen for the Odyssey record.
Oh shit! You could do a whole thing on just fucking Joe Lynn Turner bopping around.
Right, exactly. But this was kind of weird, and maybe not weird in that he's used to working with someone like Yngwie, because of course he worked with Blackmore for all those years. But I just thought it was odd that Yngwie would choose Joe Lynn Turner, seen as the type of singers that we've, he had previously, Mark Bowles and Jeff Scott Soto, and then all the singers he's worked with afterwards. But I thought this was a terrific fit and a great album. How about Megadeth replacing Chris Poland with essentially a guitar teacher of a guy who they had picked for the replacement, who was a nobody, and wound up being Jeff Young, joining for So Far So Good, So What. Right, that album pretty damn good. Whitesnake. There's a whole bunch of Whitesnake ones too, but Steve Vai joining for Slip of the Tongue. Right, replacing Adrian Vandenberg, who was going to be the guy, but then he hurt his hand, and after they had written the whole album, so Steve Vai just comes in fresh from David Lee Roth's band and does his, crazy shit all over this album, and kind of works. Right, not one of the best Whitesnake albums, but I thought it worked. John Sykes and Thin Lizzy. They had never had a player like him before. And, most people are like, oh, do they really want to be, bring this young heavy metal kid in here? This album kicks ass. I thought it worked, but of course, it brought him in knowing it was going to be the last tour. UFO replacing Michael Schenker with Vinnie Moore. I'm not a huge fan of the Vinnie Moore era albums, but I think they're okay for what they are, but it's just such a weird fit. Right? You bring in this like former shrapnel shredder to replace, a legend like Schenker, but it works. Steve Morse replacing Richie Blackmore in Deep Purple. That turned out to be a really good fit for quite a while. But I remember, I loved Morse since the 80s. I was a big fan, but Purple is one of my favorite bands of all time. And even I was kind of skeptical. I'm like, I love Morse. I love Purple. I don't know if they're going to work well together, but it totally does. Morse replacing Kerry Livgren in Kansas, and essentially replacing Robbie Steinhardt as well. So he replaced a guitar player and a violin player in Kansas. Really good album. How about Graham Bonnet twice? Graham Bonnet replacing Ronnie James Dio in Rainbow. Kind of a weird fit. Down to Earth works, right? But then he's gone. Then he replaces Gary Barden in Michael Schenker Group. Arguably, this works really, really well.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite MSG album of all time.
For sure.
And again, only one album. And, Chris brought him up at the beginning of the show, but you got to say Ian Gillan on paper was a weird fit in Black Sabbath for Born Again. You got to say Glenn Hughes was a weird fit for Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
They both worked, two great albums. And quite frankly, Dio was a weird fit too, considering, Ozzy and all the stuff that they did before. So Sabbath, for 3 albums in a row, brought in very questionable replacements, although high profile, but on paper were probably all pretty strange fits. And I thought all of them worked out really, really, really well. And do I have any others on my list here? Though? Cozy Powell and Emerson Lake, and no longer Palmer, but Powell. I wouldn't have thought Cozy would be a good fit in that band, but that turned out pretty good. And I think that's all I have.
I don't know if you want to include Joe Lynn Turner fronting Deep Purple, since you mentioned him.
There you have it. Yeah. Although I don't know how successful that pairing was.
Right. The album's kind of mediocre, but I saw the tour and
I
live they were really good.
Yeah, they were really good live. Remember they played Stormbringer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
Stormbringer or Burn. I don't know. Maybe
they opened up with Burn, and they did a little bit of Long Live Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
Strange, but they did it. Mentioning Yngwie, the two that popped in my head were Tim Ripper Owens joining Yngwie, and then Tim Ripper Owens joining for one record. And I thought it was a really good record, Iced Earth.
Yeah. Actually, 2 albums. Played on 2 albums.
Was it? He did do 2 records with Iced Earth.
Did 2 records, yeah.
Shit, I don't
More
remember.
Glorious Burden, and then the first part of that 2-part thing that he was on the first part, and then what's his face coming back again.
I see. I don't even remember that, but okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the Glorious Burden is a really good album.
I was gonna say that's the one I remember. That one was a pretty good record.
Yeah. And quite frankly, I thought he was a good fit with Yngwie, and it just, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Yngwie doesn't fit well with anybody but Yngwie.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yep.
But yeah, I thought so too. I thought he worked well with Yngwie.
And I thought another kind of weird one that I kind of was like, I don't know how that's going to work, but I actually really like the album a lot, is Red Beach replacing George Lynch and Dokken. I thought they did a great album together, and that was kind of it, one and done. But so. Anybody?
The other one, last one I thought of, because I saw Priest Saturday night, Richie Faulkner in Judas Priest. Again, Richie was relatively unknown, and he did great live with them. But I fucking hate the Nostradamus record. I got like 4 copies of it, and it's garbage. But man, that next record they did, Redeemer of Souls, was fucking great. And holy shit, to follow up to that, Firepower, I think it gets better and better all the time.
Yeah. Four copies of Nostradamus.
I didn't pay not for one of them.
Okay, that's all right.
Those were all promos from the record company. I cannot take myself to throw them out. So
I'll take it. I'll take one.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'll donate one to Bryce.
Hey, it's a decent album. That title
it's
track.
Still sealed.
The title track's pretty good.
It's got original 2005 air in it.
Okay, yeah. I'll take it.
You like Nostradamus, Bryce?
I like the title track. I won't lie.
one of 20-something songs. Right?
Yeah, hey, it kicks in. It's a nice scream. It's a fast song. It's good.
I actually attempted to re-listen to that. We did a show like, I don't know, a bunch of months ago, and Nostradamus was among some of the albums we were talking about. So I went to go re-listen to it. Man, that's a hard listen all the way through.
It's impossible. That should be a whole episode. Albums in your collection that you cannot fucking listen to.
Man, between that and the Astonishing by Dream Theater, man, woof. Bands that I love, and man, both those albums are just horrible.
I'll throw in the Steve Harris solo record, British Lion.
I never.
Holy shit! Oh,
bad.
I saw them live. It was not good.
Yeah, that's why I stayed home.
All right. If nobody has any others that they've thought up, I'm sure we'll get the folks watching to come up with quite a few of them.
Yeah. I don't know if
your list in the comments.
I was gonna say Eddie Van Halen doing the Beat It solo with Michael Jackson. It's not really, he didn't join like officially or anything, but yeah.
Bryce just nailed it. The fucking the guy from Extreme joining Van Halen for one record.
Yeah.
Except
that was a bad fit though.
That was a bad one.
But I saw that tour though, and the tour wasn't terrible.
I mean,
he's a good
really
singer.
Yeah. I think that was not his problem. They were his fault. That was just they had no material. And,
yeah, the material sucked.
Yeah, and it's like they wanted him to sound like Sammy. It's just because I mean Gary Sharon is a fine singer. I don't have an issue with him at all. So, well, there you have it, everybody. Kind of a short show today, but we got half the crew, but we covered some cool ground. And I think this one will spark lots of people coming up with other examples of this topic that we didn't come up with. There's so many. I started going through my collection. And I was like, I had this huge stack here as I listed all of them off already, but there's more. I was like, I had to stop. I was like, all right, a lot of good weird fits that on paper looked like it would not work, but the music was pretty damn good. So that's kind of the topic. So list yours down in the comments below, and we'll see you next week here on Hudson Valley Squares. Bryce, you want to plug anything going on Bryce Talks Metal?
I just posted a Skull Fist album ranking. I did a top 10 new, like brand new metal bands, not the shitty 90s stuff, but new NEW bands. Got a Laws Rocket album ranking coming up tomorrow. I'm probably going to post, but that's about it for me right now.
Cool. Yeah, we got a bunch of reviews coming up here on the channel on Wednesday. New Clutch, new Queensryche, maybe the new Dead Daisies, which is pretty killer. Whole bunch of things. Got a pretty busy week for new stuff. So much new stuff coming out now. It's like crazy. Every time I turn around, like shit, there's something else I gotta buy. I have to review that new Venom Inc. Got new live Alice Cooper, all sorts of stuff. So lots happening. So thanks for watching, everybody. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. See you next week here on Hudson Valley Squares. Tune in tomorrow for In the Prog Seat. Like I mentioned, Wednesday is new release day. Should have about 4 or 5 videos for you. And then Thursday, we've got the Monsters Den. The episode you've all been waiting for. We're going to be ranking the Hammer Dracula films, all 9 of them. So that's coming up on Thursday. Then Martin Popoff and myself will be back at the Funhouse on Friday. Saturday, the UK Connection. And Sunday, we've got ranking the albums. Simon Bray from the UK Connection and myself will be ranking the albums of 38 Special. So that's all coming up this week here on the channel. For Chris Allo, Bryce, and Chris Canzanieri, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good one, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.